The Bride of Frankenstein actually represented more about Mary Shelley's life than you may actually think. Mary Shelley's first child died, so she wrote Frankenstein, a story where death wasn't permanent. Her whole life, death and birth just happened to her. Her mother died, bringing her into the world. She woke one morning to find one of her own children had passed in the night. And of course, she didn't choose any of this to happen to her, so she wrote a woman, the Bride of Frankenstein, who finally got a choice and killed her for it. Twice. Once on the page and then once on the screen. Like 100 years later. Hi friends, I'm Betty Rage, your favorite nerdy goth mom, and this hot mess here is Lashes and Lore, where we occasionally get unreasonable about women who get written out of their own stories. I'm still over here working on our Franken-blanket, our Frankenstein, our Franket. These are all of our squares that we have created with our stories so far, and today we will be creating a white one for the bride. Of course. Every scrap of yarn is still thrifted and unraveled from sweaters. And honestly, in this episode, the blanket's kind of a supporting character. A thing stitched together from leftover pieces that nobody wanted. Yeah. And if you want to talk about it some more, hop down in the comments or we can chat over on Patreon if you'd like. Okay, so The Bride of Frankenstein. I need some coffee. Yes, coffee, not energy drink, because it's morning time. Who knew I could do this in the morning? Not I. So, let's go to the summer that invented modern horror, because it deserves the gossip treatment that it never really gets in your English class. 1816. Later historians started actually calling it the year without a summer, because a volcano in Indonesia had erupted the year before and thrown enough ash into the sky to block out the sun across half of the planet. It was like the Matrix, but the Earth blocked out the sky, not the robots. Anyway, there was no sun. It was dark, like all the time. A small group of British expats actually ended up trapped together near Lake Geneva because of the storming and darkness. Lord Byron, at that point, was like the most famous poet alive. And also, not coincidentally, a man who had just fled England forever. His marriage had collapsed in under a year. There were rumors that he slept with his own half-sister. There were rumors about him sleeping with men as well. And so he ran. He owed money to people he had really no intention of paying back. So he left. Staying in England had simply just stopped being an option for Lord Byron. So he ran. He rented a mansion called Villa Diodati. Nearby in a smaller house was an 18-year-old Mary Shelley. Percy had an infant son, William. His wife had passed away, so we had Mary and Percy and William, and then Mary's stepsister Claire, who happened to be pregnant with Lord Byron's child at the time. A fact that Byron was doing literally everything he could to ignore. 5 people, 1 villa house, and endless rain. Nowhere to go. They spent their evenings reading aloud from a French collection of German ghost stories by candlelight while actual lightning would light up the windows behind them. Freaking life goals, right? Like, yeah, me and my 5 best friends can do that any day. Are you listening, 5 best friends? Okay. I think I have 5. Anyways. But then at some point, bored the way that only spectacularly famous people trapped indoors can get, Byron issued a dare. Everyone would write their own ghost story. Percy never finished his. Byron wrote a fragment and then kind of lost interest. His physician, a young man named John Polidori, who Byron kind of treated mostly just like a punchline, took what was left of Byron's idea and then turned it into The Vampire, the story that would go on to invent the modern vampire and hand Bram Stoker half of Dracula almost 80 years later. And Mary? Mary had a nightmare. She wrote about it years later in the introduction to the published novel. She said that she saw a pale student kneeling over the thing that he had built, watching it stir, watching it open its eyes. She was 18 years old, and she had already buried 1 daughter. She had another child in the room with her that night, a son who didn't live to see his 4th birthday. She woke up from that nightmare with the heart of the whole thing, the scene that the entire novel would actually grow out of, while the two celebrated poets in the house actually never got past a few pages. But the men in the house are actually remembered as legends, Lord Byron especially. The scandal, the poetry, the whole doomed romantic persona. But the only person in Villa Diodati that actually finished what they started that summer was the 18-year-old that nobody expected anything from. All right, so now we're going to dive into the meat of the story. We're talking about the bride, who never got to really exist. Quick heads up before I get into this section, though. The scene we're about to walk through involves violence and some heavy themes around control and consent. Nothing will be depicted. I would never. But it is worth knowing before we get into it. So, Chapter 20. By this point in the novel, the creature has taught himself to read, mostly by watching a family in secret and picking through a stack of books that he found in the woods. One of those books is Paradise Lost, Milton's account of Adam and Eve. He fixates on it. He reads about Adam getting a companion that was built specifically for him, someone to share his existence, and it's that image that he can't let go of. So when he finally confronts Victor, his one request, he wants an Eve of his own. After much discussion and threats on the side of the creature, Victor agrees, very reluctantly, guiltily, but he does agree. And he goes off to a remote island to start building. And then, alone in that lab, something shifts inside him. Victor starts imagining what happens once she's alive and awake, beyond his reach. He pictures her having opinions of her own. See where this is going? Maybe she refuses to go along with the plan that the creature had already made for her. Maybe she doesn't want to disappear into the wilderness with him. And maybe, and this is the part that Victor actually writes down, maybe they have children. A whole new species born from something that he cannot predict and definitely cannot control. He even lets himself imagine that she could turn out crueler than the creature, 10,000 times more malignant, is Shelley's actual phrase. If we run down his whole list of fears, every single one of them is the same fear, just wearing a different costume. A refusal that he didn't authorize. A desire he didn't schedule. Children he does not approve of. Even the cruelty that he imagines is cruelty that wasn't part of his plan. What terrifies him is a woman who might get to choose for herself, so he destroys her, with the creature watching through the window. The actual language that Shelley uses in this part is, well, it's not gentle, all right? Victor says that he tore the creature to pieces with his own hand, trembling, in what he calls a fit of passion. He comes back afterward and looks at the remains and says that he felt like he had mangled the flesh of an actual living person. Now, Anne K. Mellor is one of the leading Mary Shelley scholars in the world. She has lectures here on YouTube. She spent decades studying this exact scene, and her words for it are blunt. The novel presents the destruction, she says, almost as a kind of assault. And in her reading, what Victor is really afraid of is independent female sexuality, one that no man can control. Mellor even points out that the detail hiding in plain sight here is this creature would have stood 8 feet tall, towering over the man who built her, free to want whatever she wanted. And there would have been absolutely nothing that he could have done about it, because she could kill him. She never gets a name. She never opens her eyes. She's destroyed for a choice that she never had a chance to actually make. So, mostly because the mere possibility of her having a say in anything was already too dangerous to allow. And you do have to remember that this is the Victorian era, where women did not have any kind of rights to make choices about literally anything. So the fact that that would be something that would terrify Victor is valid. But make of that what you will. So what did Mary Shelley actually know? What I have been thinking about, once you kind of think about the timeline, Mary Shelley's mother, the philosopher and writer Mary Wollstonecraft, died 11 days after giving birth to her. Complications from childbirth, like the kind that killed women constantly in that era, and nobody could do anything about it. There just wasn't a medical advancement for it. Mary never knew her. Then in February of 1815, a year and a half before that stormy summer at the Villa Diodati, Mary gave birth to a daughter of her own. The baby was premature. She died 2 weeks later. Mary woke one morning and just found her there, passed away. Mary actually wrote about it in her journal about a month after that. She said that she dreamed that her baby came back to life and that it had only been cold. And if they had just warmed her by the fire, she would breathe again. But then Mary woke up and there was no baby. In her journal, she says that she thought about it all day. And that entry is dated roughly a year before she had the nightmare that birthed Frankenstein. Anne Meller's research lays out just how much was happening in Mary's body while she wrote this novel. It's pretty incredible. She was 18. She'd already lost one child. She was pregnant again while drafting the manuscript and gave birth to another daughter just after finishing. And over her life, she ended up having 5 pregnancies, 4 live births, and only one of those children, her son Percy Florence, actually survived to adulthood. And the detail from Mailer's own reading of the text that really sticks out. Look at the actual language that Shelley uses for the moment Victor's creature comes to life. The anxious pacing, the candle nearly burnt out, the thing beneath him finally breathing, twitching, moving. It reads like a birth, and Victor's reaction to it isn't triumph. It's horror. He can't even look at what he has made. So he runs. Now, Meller connects that directly to something that we don't always talk about. Women who give birth and don't immediately feel a bond that they're told that they're supposed to feel. We have a name for it now, and that's postpartum depression. But Mary was writing decades before anyone had language for that experience, possibly out of something that she recognized in herself, a creator horrified by what they made, unable to love it the way that they were supposed to on sight, and underneath even that, there's the fear, Meller says, every one of Mary's pregnancies must have carried with it. Her own mother died, bringing her into the world. So what happens if the same thing happens to her? If giving life cost her hers the way it cost her mother's, I don't think that it's a coincidence that the person Victor is most afraid of creating is a woman. I think Mary Shelley knew exactly what was at stake in bringing a new life into the world, because she'd already lived through losing one and was terrified of losing more. Quick break. If you want to support this channel, the best way that you can do it is through Reanimate Threads. That is my shop where I make sustainable crocheted pieces from thrifted and upcycled yarn. Cute, monster, witchy kind of things. And by the time this video comes out, I should have just had a drop on the website. So there'll be some new things for you to look at, like adorable purses and cozies. And I'm putting together some new items that I've never had before. Because good crafts should always outlast fast fashion. The shop is open. Take a look at the link here. Every purchase goes straight back into making more episodes just like this one. Okay, let's fast forward 100 years. Okay. So, a century later, they built her anyway. In 1935, Universal Studios decides to make a sequel to Frankenstein. And the sequel is going to do the thing that the novel never let happen. It's going to actually build her, give her a body, let her open her eyes. So, director James Whale cast a British actress, this is what we're going to get caught up on today? Okay, bring it on. Director James Whale cast a British actress named Elsa Lanchester in this role. And then he did something that tells you exactly what he thought this story was really about. He cast her twice. Lanchester doesn't just play the bride. She also plays Mary Shelley herself in the prologue tacked onto the front of the film, where Shelley sits in a drawing room with Percy and Byron and casually mentions that she has in fact got more of a story to tell. Lanchester wrote about this years later in her own autobiography. She said that she believed well thought that if a woman as sweet and gentle as Mary Shelley could write something as horrifying as Frankenstein, then there must have been something else in her, some fiend underneath, driving the story out of her like it needed to go somewhere. Can I tell you guys something? The first time I saw Bride of Frankenstein, I thought it was actually Mary Shelley because timelines weren't really something I was paying attention to. I was young, okay? I've been watching this movie for a lot of years because I am not young now. Anyways, I actually thought it was like Mary Shelley that she gave her whole blessing. I didn't realize the story had been written. Anyway, I was always like, oh, that's so cool. They got Mary Shelley to, do this whole thing. I was a sweet, gullible child. Anyways, I know better now. But casting the same actress as both roles was Wells' way of making that whole idea literal. Shelley and the monster that she dreamed up played by the same face because in his mind they were never really two separate things. I mean, it's genuinely a clever piece of casting. And it's also, if you think about it for more than a few seconds, deeply strange. What the studio chose to highlight about Mary Shelley was a theory about her, the idea that something had to be hiding underneath a woman who seemed harmless. And they found that theory more interesting than anything she actually wrote or why she wrote it. And the same instinct is about to hit her creation as well, because now that the bride finally exists on screen, the industry is about to build her, market her, and destroy her all over again. And this time she gets to be conscious for it. So let's talk about the look, because I'm a marketing gal and a fashion gal, so here we go. Before she ever had a single second of screen time, the bride already has a face. And building that face took an absurd amount of effort for a character who was barely in the movie. Makeup artist Jack Pierce, the same one who built Boris Karloff's monster, worked with Whale to design her. And the concept that they landed on was Nefertiti. Egyptology was everywhere in American culture at this time. King Tut's tomb had been opened just over a decade earlier, and the whole country was kind of obsessed. So, a hairstyle modeled on an ancient Egyptian queen's headdress was not a strange choice. It was practically fashionable. So Pierce built it around a wire cage, fitted it to Lanchester's head, and wove it into her hair. I was a hairdresser for 5 years, and I did a Bride of Frankenstein-esque costume. I'll put the picture here. But because I was a hairdresser, I had one of my other hairdresser people build a full beehive, and socks. We didn't have a wire cave, but there are 2 socks inside my hair in that picture. Because you got to build around something, and they were clean. Anyway, Marcel waved her hair and added artificial pieces and streaked it white on both sides so that it read, even in black and white film, like electricity was running straight out of her skull. Beautiful. Studio lore says that the dress took 17 designers, 12 weeks to make, and that Lanchester had to fast just to fit into it. And I'm calling that lore on purpose because I couldn't actually trace either claim. Old publicity copy, so take that as you will. Like you would any kind of Hollywood press release. But what's not in dispute is the dress itself. White, embroidered, unforgettable, and the faint scarring that Pierce painted under her jawline, subtle enough that you almost don't even clock it, but a quiet reminder that whatever's standing in front of you was assembled and not born. The whole look is doing something clever, whether the filmmakers meant it that way or not. And she's beautiful and unnatural at the same exact time, glamorous the way a magazine cover is glamorous, and stitched together the way a corpse is stitched together. Universal understood exactly what they had built. The marketing for this film leaned almost entirely on her image, posters, trailers, the works, built around a character audience had never even seen, which makes the next part almost funny if it weren't so telling. So, 5 minutes. That's right. She's on screen for less than 5 minutes. That's the whole performance. After all of that design work, the wire cage built into her hair, the dress with its own mythology, the marketing campaign built around her face, the character is alive on screen for less time than it takes to boil an egg. And here's what she does with it. She wakes up, she moves like something unused to having a body. Jerky, uncertain, bird-like. Lanchester said later that she studied actual swans for the physicality, their grace and their aggression both, and you can actually see it. There's something genuinely animal about the way that she holds herself in that scene. Then she looks at the monster, the companion that she was built for, the entire reason 2 men spent a film's worth of effort bringing her into existence, and she screams. It reads less like fear and more like rejection. She hisses at him, recoils from him, makes it unmistakably clear that whatever this arrangement was supposed to be, she wants nothing to do with it. The monster, who has spent the whole film learning to speak, learning to hope, watches the one thing that he was promised reject him on sight. The moment she opens her eyes. So then he pulls the lever. The lab explodes. "We belong dead," he tells them. And then the film ends. That's it. That's the whole arc. Built, awakened, and destroyed. All in 5 minutes. Well, not the build part, but awakened and destroyed in like 5 minutes. She didn't get a name in the credits either. Isn't that wild? She's listed only as ? And somehow, out of all of that, barely any time, no lines, a single scream, she became one of the most recognizable faces in horror history. 90 years later, people who have never seen this movie could still draw that hairstyle from memory. I literally have so many Bride of Frankenstein statues. It doesn't matter. Anyways, here we go. Our square is going to be really big today because this is a long one. Sorry. But let's talk about the afterlife. How does a character with less screen time than a commercial become one of the most recognizable images in horror? Well, she just kept showing up. Rocky Horror leans directly on that hairstyle and that scream. Halloween costumes shops have been selling some version of her look for decades. Boris Karloff himself wore a version of her white-streaked hair for the very next year in a 1936 Warner Brothers film called The Walking Dead. That is the original film's own star, borrowing the look of a character who barely got to exist. And of course, fashion has allegedly borrowed from her too. That lightning bolt silhouette supposedly turning up on runways and editorial shoots for decades. Though, I'll be honest with you, I couldn't actually pin down a single confirmed designer interview or primary source actually crediting her, but I think you can see it in the visuals. So take that one as an industry lore rather than verified fact. But if you've got the receipts like Alexander McQueen look, bring it. I genuinely want to see it. But what is confirmed is that 90 years after she got 5 minutes of screen time and a question mark instead of a name, she's still getting reimagined. Earlier this year, Maggie Gyllenhaal released the film called The Bride, ! And all, with Jessie Buckley in the role, and it finally handed the character an actual voice. The reviews were all over the place. So if you hated that movie, you can talk about that in the comments if you want, but I don't care. But the point stands either way. 90 years is a long wait for a line of dialogue that is her own. So that's the real afterlife to this character, an industry, and then a whole culture reaching for her image over and over and over again, long after anyone remembered how little of her that they had actually been given to begin with. And of course, there's no official stat block for the Bride of Frankenstein in D&D, anywhere. But, I mean, Frankenstein's monster gets the flesh golem in the monster manual, but her with maybe like 4 minutes of screen time and every reason to run, nobody bothered to make her stat block. So I built her. One for D&D using the 5.5 rules and one for Daggerheart because I didn't want to pick a side. So both of them center on the same idea. And honestly, it's the whole thesis of my episode. Every mechanic that she has is built around one thing. Nobody gets to choose anything for her, not even the dice. In D&D, that's a trait. I've called it her own choice. She can override a failed save and succeed anyway 3 times a day. In Daggerheart, it's the same trait, but like dressed differently. She spends fear to shrug off anything that isn't a direct hit. She also got a scream that terrifies the whole party, and a way of surviving a killing blow instead of just dropping. So it felt right, since she never wanted the war in the first place. So full stat blocks for both of these systems are free on my Patreon. You don't have to pay for it. You just free member, download, and it's yours. So you can go grab them once this video is over. Okay, so here's the mom moment. We all love this part, right? Personally, this episode's been building for like my whole life. She's like my biggest aesthetic inspiration and has been for years. The hair, the stitched together elegance, the sense of something beautiful that was clearly assembled rather than born whole. And for a long time, I never really asked myself why. You know, it was just like, oh, that's cool. No, there's deeper reason here. That specific image is the one that stuck out of all the monsters, every icon, every gorgeous piece of horror history. I could have picked anything else instead. I have Frankenstein's monster and the Bride of Frankenstein. And now, after some healthy reflection, I think I understand. She was built from parts, scraps of other things stitched together and wired together into something that nobody had ever seen before. And somehow that process didn't make her less than whole. It made her exactly herself. That's this whole channel. That's what I do. If I am honest with you, which I'm always honest with you, so I don't know why I said that, this persona, the blanket we're building, the one that we've been building in the background of every episode, for several months now, none of it came from one grand vision on day one. It's literal scraps, thrifted yarn, unraveled sweaters, things that nobody else wanted, stitched together a little bit at a time, episode by episode, without ever fully knowing what the finished shape would be. But I didn't give myself 5 minutes and one perfect scene. I got years of small, unglamorous pieces, and somewhere in there, without really noticing it happen, they become a whole thing. And I think that's why she's stuck with me longer than any other monster. She wasn't particularly terrifying. She was barely given a chance to be. What she proved instead was something that I needed to believe long before I understood why. You don't have to be built all at once, whole and finished and perfect to be real. You can be made of leftover pieces, mismatched, stitched together over time, by people who weren't even trying to make something beautiful and still end up being the thing that everyone remembers, working through whatever trauma you may have or building the life that you actually deserve. She got 5 minutes. I've had years. I'd like to think that I've done a little bit more with my time than, I think I'm okay. And so are you. So The Bride of Frankenstein was written twice, a century apart. Right? Killed twice for exactly the same reason. Mary Shelley destroyed her own creation on the page before she was actually any character at all. Because even inside a story that Mary had complete control over, a woman with a will of her own was still too dangerous to let exist. Which is just a sign of the time. 100 years later, an industry built her again, gave her a face and 5 minutes of consciousness and destroyed her the moment that she used any of it. Nobody asked her what she wanted. Not in the story and not in the century of marketing that got built around her face or her persona or her likeness before she'd ever said a word. And she's still here. 90 years later, in every Halloween costume, every runway, every horror fan who can draw that hairstyle from memory and without ever having seen the film, built from someone else's fear, and she outlasted every single person who was afraid of her. And here's our white, beautiful, warm, square. I like it. It'll definitely stand out against all these, which I think is kind of the point. So if you want to go deeper, Anne Meller's scholarship on the novel and Elizabeth Young's writing on the film are both worth your time for real academic grounding beyond what we covered here. If this one got under your skin, the Sleeping Beauty episode is right over here. Another woman whose story got decided for her and history called it romance. So check that one out. And if you still haven't read a copy of Frankenstein, go get one. I'll leave a link to a copy of Frankenstein in the description. The comment word for today is bride. Drop it below in the comments and tell me if you knew the novel had a bride before this video. I'll woke you up. I'm Betty Ray's your favorite nerdy goth mom, and this is Faye, your sweetest little goth dog. I don't know, I haven't really given her a title. Anyways, be good to each other, love each other, and as always, free mom hugs from me to you. Bye. See you next time. Can I get woo? No woos today.